Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Before I introduce our quote, oh no, before I introduce our guest, here's a quote. Uh, the tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. Soren Kierkegaard. Before I introduce our guest, if you haven't listened to episodes 115, 146, 175, 275, 371, 558. Get over there after this episode to learn from the one and only Kevin DeLory, who we're giving a tribute today, their life, their accomplishments as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a chief lending officer of EPM. I brought the one and only founder of EPM, someone that has been influential in my life, in our family, in the Culture Matters podcast, to talk about who Kevin DeLory was, having worked with him for so many years and spent so much time together. Eddy Perez, thank you for coming on the Culture Matters podcast.
My pleasure.
You remember the first time you guys, uh, the first time you guys, started talking about vision and just where things, were going and do you remember?
With Kevin or in general?
Yeah.
During the recruitment or what?
No, just once things started getting rolling. Um,
I rember when the belief, purpose, goal, vision, and mission was all designed on that strategic, and I remember how important his input was, and I remember how it's highly emotional down to the word. Not him, just saying in general, the whole group, and how to design that the right way. Yeah, I remember that a person that will not be named said something that I later told them, and it wasn't Kevin. You ever say that to me again, even question something like that, expect to be rushed to the hospital.
at that meetup,
Huh?
at that quarterly.
Yeah, I said I will let you cross that line. However, now that you know you can never cross that line again because you went into the one sole area that is uncharted and unallowable for anybody to go on with me. So
When the team got together, the generals came together. How would you say Kevin impacted the nuances of the group or the dynamics of the team? What
well,
was it about
you're
Kevin,
using a good word right there because he was dynamic. So that's why the dynamics changed. He was a very electric guy. He showed up, he put in the work, he was fun. You need fun, you need funny. Because humor, a lot of people don't realize that humor is one of the greatest. It's actually, I think, the greatest form of competence outside of understanding things and philosophically breaking them down and explaining the why. Next up with that one is humor, because to be comical in a good sense and not in a attacking people sense, because anybody could do that one, to be honest, but being truly just out there and kind of your own persona takes a high level of emotional and IQ, like true physical intelligence. And Kevin
Mm.
had those tools. Luckily for us, in a tribute to him, nobody had really discovered those 4 years before. So for 49 years of his life, nobody had discovered it. For the last four, he got to live from what, from his spouse to his friends said the best 4 years, even though some of that he was battling cancer, obviously, and dealing with the ups and downs. However, he still truly got to live his best life towards the end.
Well, you know, um, he's Kevin lived by love, honor, and respect.
Mm-hmm. It's tattooed on his arm.
Huh. What 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 do you think about when you think about Kevin, you think about love. How would you describe that? Like how he showed up, how he led his team, and you worked,
It was just
you worked together.
he was a grinder. He was in the trenches. He was a bootstrapper. He was blue collar, is what I was going to say is, and it fit well for this industry because it's a blue collar, it's a white collar industry with a blue collar attitude that's needed. It's white collar because of the financial impact and size and what it does for millions and millions of people. And not only that, so many industries that are, multi-trillion dollar industry you're a part of. So that's obviously white collar because you're moving that much. However, it's a blue collar. It's almost borderline like when you have to show up, you're almost more like the manufacturing plant days because it is a manufacturing line. It is a flow like that runs the loan process. It's just the difference between cars and loans electronically. However, it's still the very same behaviors because it's really about what you do and the actions you take and how you improve. And that was one thing that Kevin really believed in and did. So not only believed, a lot of people believe things, but they won't take the actions and actually do it. He did, and it really fit into what this industry is all about and how to be really successful at it. So it definitely played into his personality extremely well.
Hmm.
And he was there in the trenches. He'd be the first one to call somebody. He'd jump on it. He was all about service, and the best way to service anybody is phone calls because humans are very aware, especially in this industry with how many people involved, that it's not that people mess up. Their timelines and things can get a little bit off the conveyor belt. And it's really about how you adjust and recover together with other people, not just one sided. And he was very good about holding the standard on both sides. Like, we're going to hold the standard. However, you need to hold it as well.
First to call.
He was big about calling people first, not just email, not just text. He would pick up the phone and call. Now, sometimes it didn't generate the results because, people at times have developed, he comes from a time like me that wasn't as call reluctant as they are today. Now they'll more likely dodge with an electronic form, either a text. I mean, text even better, or a lot of times, he never got along with me on this one, but you know, I'm not a big fan of email. I think it's the destruction of communication. He was a big fan of it, but I do believe too many people hide behind it. I joked with him when the internet went down like a year ago, something like that. Something like that. It went down here for like a day or two. Some of the highest, most productive days ever. And I joked with him saying, I'm going to take down the internet at least once a month.
And you guys used to read a lot together.
We did. We did. We shared a lot of books. I mean, he was even reading, you could tell when he was in, he didn't feel as bad because he was reading a lot more over the last couple of years, when he wasn't medically being held back. But yeah, he read a lot of books, philosophical, everything.
Yeah, what did you learn from him when he was going through fighting cancer?
What did I learn from him? Wow. Probably not that it's something that I didn't already believe in. However, you've got to have a purpose and a meaning, and you got to really go for it. And if it's a long, hard road to go through it, you have to do it. Because even though he passed away, he didn't lose his battle with cancer because he didn't let cancer even till the last moment control him. I mean, he was coming into work the week before, throwing up in a trash can, just saying, "Hey, it's the radiation. I should be fine." I told him he had to go to work and work from home. So he literally fought up until the last hours. What did he teach me? Immense character, immense resolve, regardless of how tough the fight is, take it to the fight. Because, like I say, even though he passed away, he didn't lose the battle. It was said by God, what's his name that I loved in ESPN when he passed away from cancer. He said that he didn't lose the battle. It's how you lived every day of your life, and I think he definitely felt Stu Scott. Childhood sportscaster I watched a lot. That was just very entertaining and fitting that Kevin fought the same way because Kevin was extremely entertaining. I mean,
Yeah,
I,
how about the stories at dinner the other night? Man, that
those
in
shouldn't
itself
get
was a story.
repeated. I mean
Oh,
that
let's
was just
not
a
share.
colossal story.
But the like, well, the fact that, come on, the, everyone is sharing stories around that table, one by one. That in itself is a story. What an overwhelming. I was overwhelmed to the point of like, I couldn't handle it at some point. Like the emotion.
Yeah.
You got 15 people, everyone sharing a story of Kevin's life. What do we, what can that teach us? I think about when Dr. Peterson says how much of a difference each of us can make in the world just by standing up straight with our shoulders back.
Yeah, standing tall can go pretty far. Standing tall can go pretty far.
How about honor? How did you see Kevin honor his teammates?
He told them what they needed to hear, not what they wanted to hear. He would let them know when they were out of line, and he would own if he got a little out of line. Because Kevin, love him, conversations we had, he would tell me it was passion. However, he was emotional. There is a difference. I would consider myself very passionate. However, I can emotionally regulate a little bit better than he could. However, I understood that it was passion based. So that's one of those things that I tell people all the time, quit focusing on the 20% of somebody's personality or behaviors that may quote unquote annoy you. What I say is there's no saints in the room. You annoy people too, even your loved ones. Just really focus on the 80%, which is the strength of somebody's true well being and character and mental health. That's the most important. So when he would get in those little fits, as we will call them, I would bring him back down and be like, dude, so what is this going to really accomplish for you? I get it. You want to get it off your chest, go ahead. However, go for a walk, probably. That's going to get way more off your chest than just letting words out. Because if you're putting negative words out in the world, if you think you're not affecting your subconscious mind, you don't know how the subconscious mind works. Going for a walk and processing all those things is going to be a lot more effective. And he would take walks around the building, even in freezing ass Rhode Island, because good
Wow.
Lord, froze our butt there this weekend when it was like 75 here in Atlanta. But yeah, he was a very passionate guy. And yeah, his emotions sometimes were kind of fun to watch, because he was self-proclaimed the baddest 5'5" man in life. He definitely was 5'5", but stood up to be like 8 feet tall, metaphorically.
Wow. What do you think made him such a great student?
Genuinely curious guy. He was the youngest of four brothers. I think that taught him a lot too. I think he wanted to get out. I've always learned that the people that prepare and invest in themselves the most want to get out of some sort of situation. Either parental, maybe the area they grew up in, possibly, obviously, to that extent. It depends. It could be just a very toxic environment, and I'm not talking about at home. It could just be the school system and where you grew up. That there was just a lot of misery loves company, and when there's not financial success or a lot of struggles, they can compound on people. Because even if there is financial success and well-being, I think humans, and something that Kevin started to realize is that you're really going to go 3 for 10. Even at your best, you're going to strike out and things aren't going to go your way. And it's not because anybody's against you. It's not that the stars were aligned. Those are really horrible stories and victimhood that you tell yourself, and that's not true. It's just things aren't supposed to always go your way, not even close. I mean, if things went your way even half the time, I think it would actually create a worse environment in this world.
Passionate, prepared, curious. What other attributes come to mind? Dynamic, you said?
He was definitely dynamic. I'd almost say electric.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
I mean, he really could motivate people. Like when they needed that jolt, not inspiration, because he was that too, but he knew when to give a jolt when somebody needed almost a borderline pep talk. He was really good at those.
So they're moving up. Like Peterson talked about, have an aim, move upward, aim up, a jolt, wake up.
Yeah. He was a great shot of espresso, kind of like you the other morning when you had those three and you had no pupils. I mean, you had
Yeah,
no
that
eye
was for
color. Your
Kevin.
pupils were your whole eye.
That was for Kevin. That, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great metaphorical way to compare him. He was a jolt like that.
Where did you see respect come into how he led and how he showed up with the team and your relationship, right? Because love, honor, respect.
He just showed up every day. He really focused on the now. The two most worthless days of the year are yesterday and tomorrow. You can work on things today for tomorrow, and you can understand things from yesterday for today to improve. However, he attacked the day. You know, if there was one thing to put on his gravestone, it would be Carpe Diem, live to seize the day. He definitely lived to seize the day. And I think a lot of it is,
Wow.
deep down, I believe that he may have known that his time on this earth was going to be a lot shorter than many others.
He had vision.
Yeah, he did. Yep, that's a good way to call it.
Yeah, how would he want us to show up for the rest of the year?
Dive in and seize every day, attack every day, jump into it, see what can be improved today. You know, the one thing I would only say is, because it was always him trying to challenge himself to be better, maybe not to hold grudges and maybe let go of things quicker. I would tell him that. However, I'd still take that 20%. Just because I don't fall into that camp doesn't mean that it's right and wrong really is a social construct of this world. It's just what's effective, what's ineffective, what's the best move, what's the most actual opportunity. I think there's a lot of social constructs in this world that really betray us.
So he used that energy. He was like Jordan. He used whatever was bothering him to move. It reminds me of that Patrick Bet David book, Choose Your Enemies Wisely.
Yeah.
How do you think, so you look at the relationships, we're talking about decades long relationships.
Yeah.
How do we mirror that? How do we model that? How do we aspire to that? How do we do that? Well, what's the
Simple.
secret sauce?
Simple. He showed up and engaged. Life's not hard. It's simple. What's hard is the consistency, and he was consistent. So if you can consistently show up and engage when it comes to relationships, when it comes to building something, fostering, automatically people will know that you've got their back. And if they needed something, that you'd be there for them. And that's all people want, that communal, brother sisterhood. They want somebody to know that they can count on. It's like the song Lean on Me. When you're not strong, if you are consistent all the times through the good, that in those moments that aren't as planned or as you had hoped, that they would be there for you. That's why I'm not surprised by the outpour. I mean, not only the outpour I received, the outpour everybody received, and the outpour that's still being received. For publications to reach out to want to write an article to honor him because how somber they saw people, for multiple conferences to make announcements to honor, that tells me everything you need to know as we're talking about that here. It's just, I'm not saying the kid was a saint, actually, quite from it. That's actually what probably made some of the stories so much funny and the mistakes he made and how he owned them. I've always been a big fan of fun, and fun usually doesn't start,
Yeah.
the most, we'll just leave it at that. It doesn't start the most,
Politically correct or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, or not even that. Just, sometimes a little bit of some, I don't want to say deviant behavior. I would just say
Bring back the fatheads.
bring back the fact, youthful things like, oh, I'm supposed to do this because I'm this age. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. Some of the things that people try to tell you you're supposed to do. Oh, it's perfectly okay to act that way.
Now I wore this real shirt because I thought I was talking to Scott, and and he said something. I don't know. Kevin owned Unique.
He did own Unique. That's absolutely true. He was constantly improving himself. He did beat to his own drum. Like I say, at times it did make it a little more challenging for me. However, I still respected that. It did make it a lot of fun, though. I like a great challenge. I think a lot of great people like challenges, even if they say they don't. They do, because even in relationships that work out really well, and we're talking about dating relationships, if one or the other person can either walk on or be walked on, that relationship falls apart too. So you need that push and pull, and he was very good with that. And obviously, I would have wanted more time. Selfishly, actually, I wouldn't even say selfishly. I'd say self-centeredly, for myself, because he was just so much fun. He was so much fun to lead. He was so much fun to grow. He reminded me, I do it for the few, not the many. I do it for the betterment of the good. Because there's been plenty of times I've asked myself, is this really worth it? You know, Industry wide, ironically, we're on the Culture Monitors podcast, and I would say that industry, the culture is horrendous. There's just too much trauma still from the financial crash that led to what I would call very horrible behavior that still exists for different factors. However, Kevin in that culture and everybody he brought over here was not. And that's what was such a breath of fresh air. He was, as we were transforming from the old guard to the new guard, he was, as something that you predicted 4 years ago, still the first true cultural hire, and then it began to change the organization. I'm not surprised that through some of these tough times, he led it well. He did well, and we kept doing well when a lot of the marketplace still isn't. Uh, if there were initials I'd give Kevin, it'd be EC for extreme character. And not just being a character, but just his character. And yes, he was also a funny character as well. I mean, I think he missed some of his life callings. He probably should have been a little bit of a comedian. I definitely think he's funnier than some of the comedians I've seen.
I think him and Jenna colluded and got me some of my watches
Oh,
when they were just trying to, because I wasn't wearing watches. I didn't want to wear any watches until for years. I had to sell my watch in the beginning of the company to pay my rent, and I thought I was being fake and a showboater, and I wasn't as engaged. I wasn't working as hard as I could. Things have come naturally and easy for me in my life. I didn't have to try, but I was failing. And I remember selling my watch to pay my rent on consignment and having to buy it back a year and a half later. And then I sold it again and said, I'm not wearing a watch until I'm successful, whatever that means, till culture matters. But Kevin and Jenna like colluded
they were
and
extremely
surprised me
close.
with some watches. And I'm
Yeah.
wearing one that I wore this today on purpose because I was thinking about Kevin. This is one he liked, the Submariner. But this was on my vision board in like 2016. Um, and she didn't even know that, and
Yeah,
it
he
just showed up
definitely
one day.
watches because that's what I bought him for his 50th birthday. Because I had the privilege of him turning
That's
50
awesome.
while we were already together. Early on in the relationship, he thought it was weird. However, as I told him, just because you think it's weird because the life you live doesn't mean that I agree with you. I understand your point, but that does not mean I agree with you. I don't think it's weird to pay respect in those fashions.
Oh, wait, weird, like to get the gift?
Yeah,
Oh, no, that's a great gesture.
he was very weirded out by it because he had only been here officially a few months at that point. However,
All right, so what was it? What was it about him and the relationship that it compelled you to give the gift?
him and Phil Mancuso also turned 50 within a week of each other. Obviously, I've been longer relationship with Phil. I honored him. I still felt like it was right to honor the first cultural hire, and even in the short period, all the changes he had done. You know,
Hmm.
it's about the gift. To me, it wasn't really that expensive. It's unfortunate, and I just thought it was a really nice gesture because yes, he did like watches. It showed that I had seen him, I had heard him, you know, and I respected him. He just, and I had to show him the way. He had never had the privilege, because it's a privilege, not because I was the one doing it. Just, it's a real privilege when somebody believes in you. It really is. It's a real privilege when somebody supports you. And he hadn't gotten that pretty much anywhere in his career. Outside of his little group, they supported him. However, you need the outside forces. You need the people that you report with. He had never really gotten that. And I think that was really hard for him to digest because, like anything, he probably thought that at some point in time the shine would wear off. And, on the deathbed conversation I had with him, because I was fortunate to have that, he realized it wasn't. And he paid me a massive compliment, um, which just showed, even being told he's going to die, even his response was honorable when he said, well, I fought the good fight and I did everything I could. And he took it very well. And then he made his phone calls and certain things that people had to commit to, which I understand. He had earned that credit to ask those questions. He had earned the ability to demand that sort of excellence because of who he was.
Why did you want him to be your partner? Private company, it's not public. It's
I
the
learned a long
biggest.
time ago, if you truly believe in somebody, you got to give them a piece of your soul. And you can't just give it to them. They have to have skin in the game. That way it doesn't become an entitlement that throws things off. And he wanted to be a part of it. And I thought, why not? I never thought of anybody else in that role. And I also never thought of it wanting anybody else in that role. So why not form a partnership? It's a very vital role. The head of sales drives revenue in this industry because it also helps drive the brand and it helps drive sustainability. Um, because he was about culture. He was about a brand. He wasn't just about the sales side of it. He would be just as tough on sales as he would with operations or finance or anybody if he thought that we were out of line. A little, sometimes he didn't word it the best. He wasn't mean, but he would get, as he called, fired up. I'm fired up today. That made sense because what's funny is I didn't even know this. He was like the Tasmanian devil when I was a kid. I didn't find out till this week, and he had that tattoo on his back.
No way.
Yeah, because even though we had hung out at pools before, he had shirts on, and I just never noticed the Tasmanian devil, and that is a great way to describe him. He really was, for our generation that understands that from the cartoon. Like,
But
he
he had it
really,
on his back, so he knew who he was. What a gift.
through and through, through and through. He owned his unique. It was very well said.
How did he unify through collaboration?
He was very big about getting on video calls with people in different departments and trying to bring action. At the end of the day, the word trust is overplayed in this world because trust is an outcome. Everybody likes to talk about the scoreboard, which is a lagging indicator. They don't want to talk about the leading indicators. The leading indicators are the formulas and the ingredients. And trust can solely be built by results generated by the actions that you take. And they cannot be self-centered. And that's how you unify through collaboration. And that's how he did it.
When you think of Kevin and you hear it show the way, what comes to mind?
Oh, I mean, it's on his arm. It's honor. Yeah, he would honor those. He would do the right thing, even if he messed up. You see, do the right thing always doesn't mean that you're always accurate. It just means that when you realize you're not, you go own it. So that way you did it always, even when you did the technically, like, I really hate the words right and wrong. They really are social constructs that have been weaponized. However, in this context, do the right thing, even at the time if he thought it was right, but it didn't go the accurate way, then he would own it. And that way he was still doing it.
From how Kevin showed up the last 2 years, how can we learn to struggle well better?
The saying that I heard recently, you'll hear people say, I'll die for my kids. Are you working out? Are you walking? Are you eating healthy? Are you living a great lifestyle? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough water? I mean, Kevin even told me he didn't take care of himself for a lot of years. I would tell you, you really want to show up, you have to live a lifestyle that allows you to show up. I think that's where most people self-sabotage themselves. And then the irony is, those that do get called terms that they shouldn't, they're just disciplined. And discipline is the ultimate form of self-love. So if you don't want to self-love yourself and destroy yourself, that's up to you. You should not put that projections on other people.
What do you what what would you tell Brooklyn about her dad?
I'd probably ask her, what are fond memories you had with your dad? I just share stories of my fond memories because I think that would resonate better. Obviously, Brooklyn will have the access to ask me any question, unfiltered and unadulterated, about her dad. However, I would just really want to trap the fond memories because I know that his weekends he was dedicated to her. Ironically, like so many guys, he wanted a son, but then he wouldn't change it for the world. You know, I understand that myself. You know,
What would you want someone to tell Gracie?
about what?
You're gone tomorrow.
I mean, I've told her this, but that after my dad's death, she was the one that helped me heal. You know, that's what daughters do. Not that sons can't either. Just daughters have certain touches. I know Brooklyn had certain touches with him. One of the sweetest things that I saw was a picture of him looking down on her saying, I went through all the treatment and this is when he was cancer free for a short period. Uh, to be able to go to father daughter dances, uh, yeah, you know, I tell
Kevin Del
I
Go
tell
ahead,
bro
sir.
all those stories, all those fond memories, how he was obsessed with her. I think people, because they're going to miss their parent, they're going to think something's wrong with them, or why did this happen to me? And it's unfortunately she's having to learn how to be resilient at a younger age that I think will, if she leans into it and obviously gets help. I always am a firm believer that people need advisors, regardless of what you want to call those advisors. That I really think that she may be able to take that energy and do something monumental. Because according to Dana, her mom, Kevin's wife, she's got a lot of wiring that Kevin has. And I think that dynamically that could become very powerful.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting, extraordinary facts of life that the suffering is like the pulling of the bow, the tension of the bow, pulling the bow farther and farther and farther back with an aim and the right arrow in the bow. We can hit a farther target closer to the center.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl said it best. If you can give purpose to your pain or struggle, you can overcome any how. And he talks about Nietzsche a lot throughout his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And it's really about what can you control? Control the controllables, which in a concentration camp was stand up tall and shave, because that showed that you were able bodied and never show an injury. So you had to will yourself through it. And that way you weren't sent to the chambers because they found you to be productive. And he did that long enough. And he was also very wise, because he was a psychologist talking to, he controlled what he can control. People would then find out he was a psychologist, and the camp leaders and the horrible humans, he would talk to them about their problems, and then that would net him and his friends advantages. So once again, he controlled the controllables, which was the only thing you control, which is your mindset. He just knew what surroundings made that mindset stronger and what needed to be done in action.
It all makes sense now. Kevin was for Viktor Frankl.
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Viktor Frankl is one of the Mount Rushmores of life. He's on Mount Rushmore for sure of what he did for humanity. I'm not saying Kevin didn't do a lot for humanity. He didn't do Viktor Frankl. And that's no shot on him. You and I aren't Viktor Frankl. So it's no shot. We are our own. However, he was an extraordinary human who lived almost 100. So it goes to show you, even the rough of conditions, you can overcome and live a long life.
Kevin helped me realize that I had lost parts of who I was from as a consequence of having to grow in other areas.
Say if he did the same
And
for
his
me, I can see that.
example,
Yeah.
yeah, he did the same for you, you're saying?
Yeah. Well, what you're saying, similar thing that I thought was, he pointed out where you had maybe lost some of your way so you could go back on it. However, he understood you were sacrificing that at the moment to try to get growth. And
But
sometimes you overgrow in
he
one
never
area.
said anything to me like this is not a conversation. It's when there was something about who he was that below my own awareness at the time, I wanted to shave my head to honor who he was. And when I did it, I realized I'd
You didn't
gone
need
too
that
far.
lion's mane to hide anymore. The The samurai look you had. Yes,
That
I agree. You were definitely trying to.
a symbolic expression of all these movies where the hero goes, Batman goes to the mountains, or Dragon Ball Z. Now I'm aging myself. They go away into the time capsule. As soon as that hair was cut, I woke up. However, it's not, I'm sick of having to have losses to learn the lessons. How entitled am I? So the work still hasn't been done. But thank you, Kevin DeLory, for being who you are, because as Solzhenitsyn said, one ounce of truth can outweigh the world. You mentioned about being right, being wrong, and yeah, it's not about if the person that's living in truth is necessarily right about the topic at hand, but integrity is it's a spirit, it's a spiritual alignment.
Your soul, living your best version of you.
What an inspiration.
Huge inspiration. He came from nothing. He goes to show you it could be done. And he didn't even do it where a lot of people take that same energy and put it into something entrepreneurial and that kind of jet sets him. You know, he did it the old fashioned, climbed the corporate ladder, put in the effort. First, he was a history teacher and didn't like it, but then he still stayed on as a teacher. It's just, I mean, that's what leaders are. They're teachers. They're advisors almost. And in that advising, there is knowledge that people need to gain so that they use their skills. They develop their skills and they use their talent stronger.
Eddie, thanks for bringing us all together.
It
What a
really
gift.
was my honor and privilege. That's why I say is, and I think that's why outside the pain of loss, that's what I'm gonna miss the most. You know, I haven't talked to him in a week. Every day I talk to him 3 to 5 times. Weekends I talk to him, text messages, emails, videos that we were all on every day. It's very bittersweet. It's very bittersweet that we're gonna carry on, tribute his legacy, grow. However, I get it. I had to do it with my dad. I get it. I had to do it with my uncle. I get it. It's just but yeah, I'm like you, dude. I'm kind of tired of losing people. I've lost a lot of people at this age, more than most. Yeah, and I'm kind of sick and tired of it. However, that's the benefit of impact. That's the other side of the coin that talks about if you make impact, you've met a lot of people, you've been of character, you've owned your mistakes, you've done that. Unfortunately, the side that I will tell you is, Jay, that you will continue to keep those losses. I'm not going to lie to you. That's the
Yeah,
price of impact.
what a gift, because I know, like, your father, right? Your father lives in my house. I just don't have a statue yet. He was a great guy. I didn't need to meet him. I have met him through how you show up, your love for him, your stories you tell. I know his life story. I've listened. I asked the questions. So your father has a
Famous
place.
towel dropping.
He has a place in my mind. Your uncle has a place in my mind, in my soul. You are you. What a gift. They people that they live through their family, the people that love them. So what a gift
Yeah.
to have.
Better.
I know who Kevin DeLory was. We're gonna honor him through the show. And we can continue to learn, and have him in our life. What a gift. What a blessing. I got all these, dozens of people in my house. You go right behind me. It's Einstein and Nietzsche, and in the hallways, Harriet Tubman and uh, Joan of Arc and Shakespeare and Booker T. Washington and Abraham Lincoln and Alexander the Great and Gandhi and Richard Feynman and Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett,
Frederick
Arthur
Douglass.
Schopenhauer, John Locke. They're all down there, right? Aristotle's there, Carl Jung's there. Those are all people I haven't met. They're all past. They're historical figures. I've tried to lean on them to garner the courage to do this show, to work with great leaders. And a blessing, I got you right here, Eddy Perez. You're one of them. Kevin, you know, all the amazing people in my life and on the show and, not on the show, but we get to work with. So this is the blessing of living and building relationships with people that have purpose and want to get better and be better and
Yeah.
show the way. It's like I got to get a whole room of all the all the people that I've met, their pictures and it. Um, now that I think about it, so I guess that's why we have to tell the stories and the values and what we've learned because it's a responsibility.
Yeah. An oath of responsibility you take.
Yeah, for our listeners that don't, they didn't meet Kevin. What and they're thinking, should I go listen to episodes? Because he was on episodes 115, 175, 275, 146, 371, and 558. And I'm making sure I say them because I've already gotten texts from people saying, hey, I can't, I'm going to go listen to those episodes. But what would be your push? You work with him for years. Why should they invest, that 6, 7 hours to learn from Kevin?
I think if you're genuinely curious, you may learn about yourself more through him. And I think that's where I tell people all the time that I want them to be selfish. I want them to grow on themselves because the most selfish thing you could do is continuously improve yourself. Then because everyone, you can't be selfless without being selfish. Once again, in other words, of the social constructs of this world that are misappropriated, misused. I didn't say self-centered. The sun doesn't revolve around you, and you're not better than anybody else, and you're not special. You may be a special human, but you're not special in the sense that you're entitled and you're better than people. So yeah, I tell people to lean into that selflessness by being selfish and getting to know themselves better. It's the greatest way they'll impact anything they love. Whatever their loves are, it's not for me to judge. It's for you to judge yourself.
Amen. If you're listening to this episode, share this with someone you love. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast and go listen to those episodes. Eddy, thanks for making the time.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. I appreciate the honor and thank you for thinking of it.